A millionaire follows his housekeeper who took food every day and discovers a shocking secret. Before we begin, leave a comment below and let us know what city you're watching from. Enjoy the story. James Holloway looked at the security monitor with a puzzled expression. Sarah Mitchell, the housekeeper who had worked in his mansion for almost a year, was hurrying out through the back of the property. It wasn't the first time he had noticed this secretive behavior. Taking something in her bag again, he murmured to himself. James owned Holloway Tech, one of the most promising tech companies in Boston. At 38 years old, he had everything money could buy: a 3-story mansion in Beacon Hill, luxury cars, and investments worth millions. But ever since his divorce 2 years ago, he lived alone in the large house, buried in work and surrounded by silence. Something about Sarah's behavior sparked his curiosity. On impulse, James grabbed his coat and followed her. He kept his distance as the young woman walked quickly for 3 blocks, then turned down a quieter street. That's when he saw her stop in front of someone sitting on the ground by an abandoned building. A thin, exhausted-looking woman held a small girl in her arms. A boy around 5 stood beside her, staring sadly at the ground. Homeless. James stood behind a tree, watching the scene unfold. "Kate, I brought dinner for you," Sarah said warmly as she pulled food containers from her bag. "There's chicken, potatoes, and some vegetables. It's still warm." "Sarah, you're an angel," the homeless woman replied with a shaky voice. "I don't know how to thank you." "Noah, look, I brought that chocolate pudding you like." Sarah gently ruffled the boy's hair, and he finally smiled. James felt something stir in his chest. His housekeeper had been taking food from his kitchen to feed the homeless. That he should have been angry, but he couldn't take his eyes off the scene. Sarah helped the woman feed the little girl while chatting kindly with the boy about his day. "Is Emma running a fever again?" Sarah asked, touching the girl's forehead. "It started last night. I'm giving her the medicine you brought. But I'll bring more tomorrow," Sarah promised, pulling a small blanket from her bag. "It's getting cold at night." James watched, fascinated, as Sarah sat down on the dirty ground to talk with the family, without any sign of disgust or hesitation. She laughed with the boy, told stories, and listened to Kate's worries. For 20 minutes, she turned that dark corner into something that felt almost like a home. When Sarah finally left, James rushed back to the mansion before she returned. He slipped in through a side door and went straight to his office, his mind racing. Minutes later, he heard the service door quietly open and close. "Mr. Holloway?" Sarah knocked on the office door. "Is there anything else you need before I go?" James looked up and truly saw her for the first time in a year. Sarah Mitchell had intense green eyes, brown hair tied back in a simple ponytail, and work-worn hands. She dressed modestly, nothing flashy, and carried herself with a quiet dignity that now deeply intrigued him. "Sarah, how long have you worked for me?" he asked. 11 months, sir," she replied, clearly surprised by his sudden interest. "And what do you do after work?" He noticed the way her eyes shifted and her shoulders tensed. "Nothing special, sir. I go home, sometimes clean a few more houses." "And you never take anything from this house without permission, right?" Her face went pale. "Mr. Holloway, I would never—" "We need to talk tomorrow, Sarah. Come in an hour earlier." A shiver ran through her, but she nodded. "Yes, sir." After she left, James sat motionless in his chair, replaying the scene he had witnessed. In his world of calculating executives and shallow relationships, real compassion was rare. While the phone rang insistently beside him, he ignored it. Lost in the image of his housekeeper sitting on the dirty ground, sharing not just food, but humanity. Sarah entered her small one-bedroom apartment in Dorchester, a working-class neighborhood miles away from Beacon Hill's luxury. The place was modest, but spotless, a reflection of someone who spent her days cleaning other people's messes. "He knows," she whispered, dropping her bag onto the worn couch. "He knows about the food." A wave of panic washed over her. Losing the job at the Holloway mansion would mean not being able to pay rent, and it would also mean she could no longer help Kate and her children. Sarah opened the nearly empty fridge and stared at her dinner. Half a sandwich and an apple. She always set aside part of her own food to go with what she brought back from the mansion. She never took anything valuable or any money, just leftovers that would usually be thrown away. Did that make her a thief in the eyes of her millionaire boss? Meanwhile, just a few miles away, James Holloway sat alone at his extravagant dining table. The chef had prepared a perfect salmon with organic vegetables, but he just poked at the food, lost in thought. "Anything else, Mr. Holloway?" asked Martha, the housekeeper. "Martha, what do you know about Sarah, the cleaning lady?" The housekeeper looked surprised by the question. "Sarah? She's a good woman, works hard, always on time. We've never had any problems." "Does she have any family?" "Not that I know of, sir. She doesn't talk much about her personal life." "Why do you ask?" "No special reason," James replied vaguely. "You can go now, thank you." After she left, James picked up his laptop. With a few clicks, he opened the employee records and pulled up Sarah Mitchell's file. There was very little there beyond the basics. 28 years old, single, high school graduate, references from 2 previous cleaning jobs. No family listed as emergency contacts. His phone rang. It was Victoria Holloway, his cousin and the company's CFO. "James, did you see the messages I sent? The Silicon Valley investors want answers by tomorrow." Her voice sounded annoyed. "I'm looking at it now," he lied, still reading Sarah's file. "No, you're not. I know that tone. What's distracting you this time? Another charity idea to ease your guilt for being rich?" James frowned. Victoria had always been blunt, sometimes almost harsh. As his only close relative, she had taken on the role of family business guardian after James's parents died, even though she was younger than him. "Let's talk tomorrow at the office," he said, trying to avoid the subject. "You missed the meeting with the perfect tech executives today." "Again. I'll send a formal apology." After hanging up, James went back to Sarah's file. There was something about her that intrigued him. It wasn't just the kind act he had witnessed, but the dignity with which she did it. In his world of calculated relationships, strategic deals, and a failed marriage, finding someone who gave without expecting anything in return felt almost like an anomaly. The next morning, Sarah arrived an hour early as requested. She was visibly nervous, gripping the strap of her worn purse as she waited in James's office. He walked in, holding 2 cups of coffee. He offered one to her. "Mr. Holloway, about yesterday, I followed you, Sarah." The color drained from her face. James went on. "I saw you giving food to that homeless woman and the children." Sarah stood straighter, ready for whatever would come. "If you're going to fire me, I understand. But please let me explain. The food I take are leftovers that would be thrown away. I've never taken anything valuable, I swear. Kate and her kids are." "How long have you been doing this?" James interrupted, his voice calm. 6 months. I met Kate just after she lost her apartment. Emma had just been born." James took a sip of coffee, studying Sarah over the rim of his cup. "You've been sharing your own dinner with them too, haven't you?" Sarah's eyes widened. "How did you?" "I saw your face when the boy smiled at the pudding. That wasn't just kindness, Sarah. That was sacrifice." She looked down. "It's not a big deal. I've been through hard times too." James set the cup down and walked to the window, looking out at the city of Boston waking up. "Do you know how much money I donated to charity last year, Sarah?" "No, sir." $3 million. He turned to face her. "But not once did I sit on the floor with someone who needed help. Not once did I look in the eyes of someone receiving that money." Sarah stayed quiet, unsure where the conversation was going. "What do Kate and the kids need besides food?" he asked suddenly. "A place to live. A job for Kate. School for Noah. Medical care for Emma. She has asthma." James nodded slowly, an idea forming in his mind. "Sarah, I'm not going to fire you. In fact, I want to make you an offer." "An offer?" Sarah repeated, uncertain. James motioned for her to sit down. There was something different in his eyes, a kind of intensity Sarah hadn't seen before. "I want you to keep helping Kate and her kids, but on a bigger scale," he explained. "Not just with leftovers and basic medicine." "I don't understand." "I'm offering to fund a real social project. A place where Kate and others in the same situation can get real help, and I want you to run it." Sarah stared at him, speechless. "Is this a joke?" "I never joke about money," he replied seriously. "I'm asking you to stop being my cleaning lady and become the director of a new social project funded by the Holloway Foundation." "But why? And why me? I don't have the background for something like that." James leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "Background? You kept a family going for 6 months with leftover food and your own resourcefulness. That's more qualification than most NGO directors I know. Sarah shook her head, not believing what she was hearing. Mr. Holloway, this makes no sense. You barely know my name, and now you want to give me a job running an entire project? Why? What do you get out of this? The question hung in the air. James hesitated, then stood up and walked over to a picture frame turned face down on his desk. He flipped it over, revealing a photo of him with an older couple. My parents. They built Holloway Tech from the ground up. When they passed away 5 years ago, they left me not just the company, but also a legacy of social responsibility that I never really fulfilled. He paused. My ex-wife used to say I helped people from a distance so I wouldn't have to get emotionally involved. Sarah watched him closely. James took a deep breath before going on. 3 weeks ago, I was diagnosed. Brain tumor. Sarah gasped, but James raised a hand to stop her. The doctors say I have between 6 months and a year, maybe less. Mr. Holloway, I'm so sorry. I don't want your sympathy, he cut in firmly. I want your help. Seeing you yesterday, sitting on that dirty floor, really connecting with those people, it made me realize I've spent my whole life keeping the real world at arm's length. He paused. Before I go, I want to do something that truly matters. Sarah stayed silent, taking it all in. A question came to her mind. And what if I say no? Then I'll find someone else, but I doubt I'll find anyone with your natural instinct for this. Sarah stood and paced the room, trying to sort her thoughts. Finally, she turned to James. What exactly would my job be? First, finding a suitable place for the community center. Then, putting together a team, developing programs. He waved his hand slightly. You understand these people's real needs better than I do. And Kate? We'll start with her and the kids. A place to live, medical care for the girl, school for the boy. Sarah crossed her arms. Why do I feel like there's more to this than you're telling me? James gave a faint smile. Sharp. Yes, there's something else. He went back to the desk and picked up a folder. My cousin Victoria is brilliant when it comes to business, but she has a very traditional view of charity. She believes in one-time donations, not structural change. If she finds out about this project, she'll do everything she can to stop it. So, I'll be your secret rebel? Something like that. Officially, you'll be hired as my personal assistant. In reality, you'll have full freedom to develop the project, with direct access to a specific account. Sarah shook her head. This is crazy. I have no experience managing anything, let alone a large-scale social project. You've got something more important, genuine empathy. The rest can be learned. He held out his hand. So do we have a deal? Sarah looked at his outstretched hand, knowing her answer could change not only her own life, but Kate's and many others. On one condition, she said finally. I have to stay true to myself. No pretending, no office politics. James nodded. That's exactly why I chose you. When they shook hands, neither of them had any idea of the storms ahead, or how that simple gesture would shape their futures in ways neither of them could imagine. You hired your cleaning lady as a personal assistant? Victoria Holloway made no effort to hide her shock. Dressed elegantly in a navy blue suit, she stared at her cousin across the meeting room table. Have you completely lost your mind, James? Sarah has qualities that will be useful for some projects I have in mind, he replied calmly, sorting through documents. What qualities? Knowing which cleaner works best on marble. Victoria gave a dry laugh. What's your real interest in this woman? James looked up from the papers. You always assume the worst in people, Victoria, and you've always been far too naive. She leaned forward. Is this because of the doctor's news? Are you having some kind of early midlife crisis? The mention of the supposed diagnosis made James pause. The lie about the tumor had come out spontaneously, a way to explain his sudden interest in the social project. He hadn't expected the story to reach Victoria so quickly. My health is not up for discussion, he deflected. Sarah will start today as my assistant, and that's final. Victoria studied him for a moment, then smiled, that calculated smile James knew all too well. Of course, cousin. Your company, your decisions. She stood up gracefully. I can't wait to get to know this very special assistant better. Across town, Sarah was facing her own moment of truth. A job? A real job? Kate was holding Emma in her arms, while Noah played with an old toy car a few feet away, in the small park where they had agreed to meet. Yes, with a steady paycheck and everything, Sarah confirmed. And there's more. I found an apartment for the three of you. This can't be real. Kate's eyes filled with tears. Who would do something like that for us? Sarah hesitated. James had asked her to keep his direct involvement quiet, at least for now. It's a new community project, she said vaguely. I'm helping to develop it. Overnight, you became a social worker? Kate looked suspicious. Sarah, you're not doing anything dangerous, are you? Of course not. Sarah sat down next to her friend. It was an unexpected but legitimate opportunity. Trust me. Kate looked at her for a long time. Noah asks about you every day, you know? When is Aunt Sarah coming back? You're the only person besides me he trusts since we ended up on the streets. Sarah felt her chest tighten. You won't be on the streets anymore. The apartment is in Roxbury. It's small, but it's clean and safe. It has 2 bedrooms, and it's close to a good public school for Noah. And what do I have to do in return? Kate asked softly. Join the program. Look for a job. Keep the kids in school and take them to their doctor appointments. Sarah held her friend's hand. Give yourselves a real chance. That afternoon, Sarah arrived at Holloway Tech wearing newly bought clothes, simple slacks and a white blouse. She felt out of place among the executives in expensive suits and women in high heels. The front desk receptionist looked her up and down. Can I help you? I'm Sarah Mitchell. Mr. Holloway is expecting me. The woman raised a perfectly shaped eyebrow. Oh, the new personal assistant. There was something in her tone that made Sarah's face burn. Before she could answer, a polished female voice came from behind her. You must be Sarah. I'm Victoria Holloway. Sarah turned to see a woman around 35 years old, impeccably dressed, with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Nice to meet you, Mrs. Holloway. Miss Holloway, Victoria corrected her. James is on a video call. I thought we could take a moment to chat. It wasn't a suggestion. It was a command. Sarah followed Victoria into a smaller meeting room, feeling like an animal being led into a trap. So, Victoria began as soon as she closed the door. How does a cleaning lady become the CEO's personal assistant overnight? Must have been a very impressive interview. Sarah kept her composure. Mr. Holloway saw potential in my work. I'm sure he did. Victoria gave a cold smile. My cousin has always had a soft heart, especially for charity cases. I'm not a charity case, Sarah replied more firmly than she meant to. You're not? Victoria tilted her head. Well, whatever it is you're planning, just know that this company and my cousin's fortune are under my protection. James might be distracted for now with personal matters, but I'm always watching. The door opened and James walked in. Victoria, I see you've met Sarah. Victoria's expression changed instantly. Yes, we were having a lovely chat. Welcome to the team, Sarah. Once she left, James closed the door. Is she always like that? Sarah asked. Actually, that was her being polite, James said with a half smile. How did it go with Kate? Suspicious, as expected, but she accepted the help. James nodded, pleased. Good. Now about the community center. I found 3 properties we could convert. I'd like you to visit them this week. Mr. Holloway? James, please. If we're going to work on this project together, we need to drop the formalities. James, she corrected herself, feeling strange saying his name. Everyone around here seems to think I'm your, well, lover? He finished without hesitation. Let them think that. It'll be a good cover for the project. That doesn't bother you? Should it? Sarah studied the man in front of her. She had never seen her boss in this light, not as a distant millionaire, but as a man with a purpose and apparently not much time to see it through. I have a question, she finally said. If you only have a few months left, like you said, why start something you won't live to finish? James met her eyes, and for a moment, Sarah saw a vulnerability in him that he rarely showed. Maybe because, for the first time in a long while, I've found something that feels like it actually matters, he said simply. Now, let's get to work. 2 weeks later, Sarah walked through an old warehouse in the Dorchester neighborhood. The wide space with dust-covered windows had been empty for years, but she could already see the potential. This is perfect, she said, her voice echoing in the empty space. We could have temporary housing upstairs, a community kitchen over there, and job training space in that corner. James watched Sarah with growing admiration. She had thrown herself into the project with a passion and skill that surprised him. In just 2 weeks, she had researched models of community centers, visited local nonprofits, and put together a basic plan that would impress any social services expert. "How did you learn all this so fast?" he asked. Sarah shrugged. "Mostly the internet, and talking to people who really need help. Sometimes the best research is just listening." "I agree," said a woman's voice behind them. Victoria was standing at the entrance, elegant as always in her expensive dress, looking completely out of place in the dusty space. James frowned. "How did you find us?" Victoria smiled. "I handle the company's finances, remember? Any significant purchase crosses my desk, including the acquisition of this charming location." Sarah and James exchanged uneasy glances. "Victoria, I was going to tell you," James began. "About your little charity project?" she interrupted, walking through the space and running her fingers along a wall with clear disapproval. "A center for the homeless, from what I gathered in the paperwork. Noble. Expensive, but noble." "The money is coming from my personal account," James said. "And the name of the foundation on the documents?" Victoria asked. "Holloway, the same name our company carries, the same name our investors associate with cutting-edge technology, not soup for the homeless." "Please don't talk like that," Sarah cut in, unable to hold back. Victoria turned slowly to face her, eyebrows raised in theatrical surprise. "Excuse me? The cleaning lady has opinions on corporate strategy now?" James stepped forward. "Sarah is managing this project under my direct supervision, Victoria." "Is she? Fascinating." Victoria walked up to Sarah. "Then tell me, Sarah, what experience do you have in running social projects? What's your academic background? Before dusting off my cousin's mansion, where exactly did you work?" Sarah met Victoria's stare without flinching. Real experience doesn't always come with a degree. "Diplomatic," Victoria said with a humorless laugh. James always had a soft spot for lost causes. First the failed marriage, and now. She waved vaguely at the space around them. "This." James looked like he was about to explode, but surprisingly, it was Sarah who stepped forward. "Miss Holloway, I understand your concern about the company's reputation. That's why we're planning to launch this as a separate initiative, with its own branding. The investors don't even need to know, unless we want to use it later for social marketing." Victoria and James looked at Sarah, equally surprised. She went on, "As for my experience, I'm learning fast, and I have something a lot of trained managers don't: direct contact with the people we're trying to help. I know exactly what they need, because I live among them." Victoria studied Sarah for a moment, then gave a smile that held no warmth at all. "Impressive. A cleaning lady with a talent for public relations." She turned to James. "Keep your little charity toy, cousin. If it helps you cope during this difficult moment, who am I to judge? Just keep the numbers separate, and I'll live with it." After Victoria left, a heavy silence hung between them. "She's going to look into you," James finally said. Victoria never lets things go. Sarah felt a chill run through her. What could she find? "That depends. Do you have something to hide?" That night, alone in her apartment, Sarah opened a box hidden in the back of her closet. Inside were yellowed newspaper clippings and carefully preserved photographs. With trembling fingers, she picked up a newspaper article with the headline, "$1 million Fraud Shakes Chicago Financial Market." The photo showed a man in a suit being led away by police, and just behind him, slightly out of focus, was a younger Sarah, dressed in elegant clothes she could barely remember wearing. "David," she whispered to the image of the man, "you ruined everything." Sarah used to be Sarah Bennett, wife of David Bennett, one of Chicago's most promising financial consultants. They lived a life of luxury, charity galas, international travel, everything, until the day it all fell apart. David had set up a fraudulent scheme that deceived investors and friends alike. When the truth came out, he took his own life, leaving Sarah to face the aftermath alone: massive debts, lawsuits, and the social stigma. Let's have a little fun with those who only read the comments. Type McDonald's in the comments. Only those who make it this far will understand. Now let's get back to the story. She tried to rebuild her life, changed her name, started fresh in Boston. For years she worked hard to pay off what debts she could, living as simply as possible. The trauma had changed her deeply, and now, in a strange twist of fate, she found herself working for another wealthy businessman, once again surrounded by privilege. Her phone rang, snapping her out of her thoughts. It was James. "Sarah, I need you to come to the estate tomorrow morning. I've got an idea to speed things up with the project." "Did something happen?" she asked, concerned by the urgency in his voice. "Nothing serious. I just want to make the most of the time I have." His vague reference to the supposed illness made Sarah press her lips together. Even if it was for a good cause, lying about something so serious still bothered her. "I'll be there at 8. After hanging up, Sarah carefully stored away the newspaper clippings. If Victoria ever found out about her past, it would ruin everything. Not just her job, but more importantly, the help that was finally starting to reach Kate and so many others who needed it. Rain was pounding against the windows of the Holloway mansion when Sarah arrived the next morning. James welcomed her into the study, which was filled with architectural blueprints and documents. "I want to speed up the warehouse renovation," he said without delay. "I hired a construction company that can finish the job in 1 month instead of 3. Sarah's eyes widened. "Is that even possible?" "With enough money, almost anything is," James said. He seemed different, more energized, almost manic. "I also approved the purchase of the furniture and equipment you suggested." "James, we don't have to rush. We should take our time, plan the programs properly." He slammed his hand on the table. "We don't have that luxury." Then, more gently, "I don't have that luxury." Sarah felt that stab of guilt again. The lie about the tumor was weighing on her more each day. "Sorry," James ran a hand through his hair. "I'm under pressure. Victoria's questioning every expense, and the shareholders are getting nervous about my divided focus. Maybe we should tell your cousin the truth about the center." "No." His answer was firm. "Victoria only sees success in financial terms. To her, helping people is just an expensive hobby, not a real need." A thunderclap rattled the windows, followed by a sudden blackout. The mansion was plunged into darkness. "Great," James muttered. "The generator should kick in any second." But it didn't. Only the occasional flash of lightning lit the room. "Looks like the backup system failed," James said, turning on his phone's flashlight. "I'll go check the control panel in the basement. You should stay here." "I'm going with you," Sarah said. "2 sets of eyes are better than 1. The mansion's basement was surprisingly large. A maze of hallways, storage rooms, and old machinery. Using their phones for light, they made their way down the service stairs. "Never thought I'd see the great James Holloway doing manual labor," Sarah commented, as he opened an electrical panel. "I grew up helping my dad fix things," he replied, surprising her. "Before the money and the tech, we were just a middle-class family with a garage full of projects." "Hard to picture that." "That's because you only know this version of me." James worked the switches with ease, the distant executive who barely noticed the cleaning lady. Sarah felt her face flush. "Well, you're definitely making up for that now." A deafening crash shook the structure, followed by the sound of something breaking. Instinctively, James pulled Sarah close, shielding her. "Lightning," he said, still holding her. "Must have hit a nearby tree." They were suddenly very close, their faces lit only by the bluish glow of their phones. Sarah's heart was racing. From the shock, she told herself. "I think we can let go now," she whispered. "Right." James released her quickly and focused back on the panel. "Found the problem, a blown fuse." As he worked to replace it, Sarah watched his hands, strong, capable, nothing like what she'd imagined from a millionaire executive. There was so much more to this man than she had first thought. "So, what was your life like before?" she asked. "When you were just a regular middle-class kid?" James smiled, focused on the task. "Pretty normal. Public school, work during summer breaks, used to argue with my cousin over who got to use the car on weekends. Hard to believe you and Victoria were close." "We were inseparable," he said. "Victoria was brilliant, always helped me with my homework. When my parents died, she was the one who kept me from falling apart." "What happened? Between the two of you, I mean." James paused, thinking. Success, money, different views on what to do with it all. He shrugged. "What about you? Have you always been this devoted to helping people?" Sarah looked away. "Not always. There was a time when I was very focused on myself." "What changed?" A painful memory crossed her face. "I learned the hard way that building a life on appearances and money is like building a sandcastle during high tide." Before James could ask more, The lights suddenly came back on. The intimate moment was broken by the return of electricity. "Mission accomplished," he said, closing the panel. As they climbed the stairs, a heavy silence followed them, the kind that comes when two people begin to see past first impressions. Back in the office, they picked up the conversation about the community center. But something had shifted. The professional distance had cracked just enough to let in glimpses of vulnerability on both sides. "I think we should visit Kate and the kids," James said as they reviewed the kitchen equipment list. "I want to see how they're settling into the apartment." Sarah looked up, surprised. "You want to go in person?" "Why the surprise? It's my project too." "It's just, you always seem to prefer helping from a distance, without getting too involved." James put down his pen and leaned back in his chair. "Maybe I'm trying to change that. Realizing your time is limited tends to shift your priorities." Once again, the lie about his health hung between them. Sarah felt a knot in her stomach. If he was changing his life based on a false diagnosis? "James, about your condition." "I don't want to talk about it," he interrupted firmly. "Each day has enough troubles of its own, right? Today, we're planning something that will help hundreds of people. That's what I want to focus on." Sarah nodded, swallowing the words that wanted to come out. How could she tell him she knew exactly what it was like to lose everything? That she understood, maybe better than he realized, the deep desire to leave something good behind before it was too late. The next day, they visited Kate at the small apartment in Roxbury. Noah ran to Sarah the moment they walked in, wrapping his arms tightly around her legs. "Aunt Sarah, I have a real room now, with a bed just for me." "That's wonderful, isn't it?" Sarah smiled, ruffling the boy's hair. "Noah, this is Mr. Holloway. He's helping with the project." The boy looked up at James with curious eyes. "Are you rich?" "Noah," Kate said, embarrassed. "I'm sorry, Mr. Holloway. Kids have no filter." James laughed, a genuine sound Sarah rarely heard. "It's okay. Yes, Noah, I have some money, but you know what I've learned? Money's not much fun unless you do something good with it." As Kate showed them the apartment, Sarah watched James interact with Emma, who had recovered from her fever. To her surprise, he seemed completely at ease with the 2-year-old, letting her play with his expensive tie and patiently answering her endless toddler questions. "You're good with kids," Sarah said as they headed back to the car. "I had a younger sister," he replied, a shadow passing over his face. "She died when we were teenagers. Leukemia." "I'm so sorry, I didn't know." "You won't find it in any business magazine," he said with a sad smile. "It doesn't fit the image of the ruthless CEO of Holloway Tech." In the car, James grew quiet. Kate's smart. With the right training, she could work in admin or support. "She used to be a legal assistant before everything fell apart," Sarah said. "A tough divorce, medical issues with no insurance, and suddenly, she was on the street." "How did you meet her?" Sarah hesitated. "It was by chance." I recognized the look. That look people have when they've lost everything and still can't believe it happened. James studied her for a long moment, like he was trying to solve a puzzle. "Sometimes I get the feeling you understand way more than you let on, Sarah." She turned to the window, watching the streets go by. "We all have our secrets." The event hall at the Renaissance Hotel sparkled with golden lights and elegant floral arrangements. Boston's elite mingled with champagne flutes, evening gowns, and polite conversation. It was the fundraising dinner for the new Horizonte Community Center, a name carefully chosen to leave out the Holloway surname, just as James had promised Victoria. Sarah watched the scene with a mix of fascination and discomfort. Wearing a simple black dress borrowed from Martha, the housekeeper, she felt like an outsider among so many wealthy and influential people. "Relax," James said as he came over and handed her a glass of water. "You're doing wonderfully. Half these people think I'm your mistress. The other half think I'm some kind of personal charity project," she muttered. "And what does it matter what they think? We're here to get donations, not win a popularity contest." James looked especially sharp that night in his perfectly tailored tuxedo. No one would ever guess he was carrying the weight of a terminal diagnosis, because it wasn't real, Sarah reminded herself with a stab of guilt. The past few weeks had been intense. The community center was taking shape quickly. Kate was already working part-time at the front desk, Noah was enrolled in the local school, and Emma was attending a subsidized daycare. 5 other families had joined the pilot program. The early results were promising enough to justify tonight's gala. "James, what a lovely surprise!" A sophisticated woman approached, kissing the air near his cheek. "I haven't seen you at a social event in months." "Caroline, this is Sarah Mitchell, Executive Director of the Horizonte Center." The woman looked Sarah up and down. "Fascinating. I've always admired your knack for discovering hidden gems, James." As Caroline walked away, Sarah sighed. "This is going to be a long night." "Just keep your focus," James said, gently touching her elbow. "All of this is about making sure the center keeps going when I'm not here anymore." The memory of the lie weighed on her again. Sarah was about to say something when Victoria appeared, stunning in a red dress. "Cousin," Victoria said with a smile, "I have to admit I'm impressed. This event is far more elegant than I expected." "Sarah planned the whole thing," James replied. Victoria turned to Sarah with a sharp smile. "Hidden talents everywhere, it seems. First a housekeeper, then a personal assistant, now an event planner." "I just did my job," Sarah replied politely. "Of course." Victoria took a sip of her champagne. "James, the Andersons want to discuss that investment. Do you mind?" As James walked off with Victoria, Sarah took the opportunity to look around the room. Bankers, business people, local politicians, all there to attach their names to a noble cause, without necessarily understanding the reality of the people they claim to help. "Miss Mitchell?" A waiter approached. "There's a phone call for you. They said it's urgent." Out in the hotel lobby, Sarah answered the phone. Worried. It was Kate, sounding panicked. "Sarah, someone's here asking questions about you. A very well-dressed woman. She says she works for a background check agency." Sarah felt her blood run cold. What exactly did she ask? How we met, how long I've known you, and then she started showing pictures. Old pictures of you, Sarah, from Chicago. "Kate, don't talk to anyone else. I'm coming right now." As she hung up and turned around, she found Victoria standing behind her, a triumphant smile on her face. "Trouble in paradise, Sarah? Or should I say, Sarah Bennett?" The world seemed to stop. You sent someone to Kate." "Basic due diligence," Victoria said with a shrug. "Did you really think I'd let a total stranger manipulate my cousin and threaten our company without finding out who she is? Especially someone with such an interesting past." "It's not what you think." "No?" Victoria raised a perfectly shaped eyebrow. "Wife of one of Chicago's biggest financial criminals, living under a false name, planted inside the home of one of Boston's wealthiest men? It sounds exactly like what I think." "I had nothing to do with David's crimes." "Easy to say now." Victoria glanced at her diamond watch. "In exactly 10 minutes, I'll be on that stage thanking everyone for coming. After that, I'll be making an important announcement about certain irregularities found in the project." Panic surged in Sarah's chest. "Victoria, please. This project is helping real people. Don't destroy it out of revenge." "Revenge?" Victoria let out a laugh. "This is business, dear. I'm protecting the Holloway family's interests just like I always have." She stepped closer and whispered, "James has been emotionally vulnerable since the diagnosis. You saw an opening and took it. Classic setup." "There is no diagnosis," Sarah said quietly. "James made up the tumor." Victoria blinked, momentarily thrown off. "What? He lied about being sick to justify the project. He's not dying." For a moment, Victoria looked genuinely shocked. Then her face hardened. "Even worse. You both lied to manipulate everyone." She adjusted her evening bag. 10 minutes, Sarah. I suggest you use that time to say goodbye to your little project." As Victoria walked away, Sarah rushed back into the ballroom, desperately scanning the room for James. She found him speaking with a group of potential donors. "James, we need to talk. Now." He picked up on her urgency right away. Excusing himself from the group, he followed Sarah to a quiet corner. "Victoria knows everything," Sarah said quickly. "About my past in Chicago, about your fake diagnosis, all of it. She's going to expose everything in 10 minutes. James went pale. "How?" "She looked into my past, sent someone to talk to Kate. James, she's going to tear it all down." For a moment he looked stunned. Then, surprisingly, a cold calm settled over his face. "Why didn't you ever tell me about Chicago?" Sarah didn't expect that. "What? Does that really matter right now?" "Yes, it does. You were married to David Bennett, the man who ran a multi-million-dollar investment scam." I didn't know what he was doing. You didn't? James stepped back. You lived with him, Sarah. Enjoyed the money, the parties, the trips. Is it really possible you never suspected a thing? His words hit her like slaps. You're believing her? After everything we've built together? We built it on lies, he said bitterly. You hid your past. I pretended to be sick. To help people. Everything we did was to help real people. James ran a hand over his face, looking suddenly worn out. Maybe Victoria's right. Maybe I let myself get caught up in the perfect story, the kind-hearted cleaner secretly feeding the poor. No, Sarah felt tears sting her eyes. Don't do this. Don't let her ruin something good over corporate politics. The MC announced the thank you speeches would begin in 5 minutes. I'll talk to her, James said. Maybe I can strike a deal. What kind of deal? Our names are on the line. No, Sarah, my name is on the line. My family's name, my company's. Her words came out before she could stop them. And what about the people we're helping? Kate, Noah, Emma? Don't they matter? James hesitated, the inner struggle showing clearly in his eyes. Of course they matter. But I have to think about the bigger picture. The bigger picture? You were a different man in the basement during that blackout. A man who cared about what really matters. Before he could respond, Victoria stepped up to the stage, glowing in her red dress. The microphone squealed slightly as she adjusted it. Good evening, everyone. On behalf of the Holloway family, I want to thank you for attending this charity event. Sarah looked at James one last time, seeing only hesitation on his face. With her heart breaking, she turned and walked toward the exit. Before we move on to the thank yous, Victoria continued, I have an important announcement about the Horizon Community Center and who's really running it. Sarah didn't stay to hear the rest. With tears streaming down her cheeks, she left the elegant hall and stepped into the cold Boston night, feeling like she was once again losing everything she had built. 3 days had passed since the disaster at the fundraiser. Sarah couldn't even turn on the TV, afraid to see her face on the local news, her past exposed for all to see. Her phone was full of missed calls. Kate, Martha the housekeeper, even some unknown numbers. But still, nothing from James. Her small apartment had never felt so suffocating. She was slowly packing her few belongings, preparing for yet another escape, another fresh start. Chicago, now Boston. What city would be next? A firm knock at the door startled her. Sarah froze, heart racing. Was it the police? Reporters? Old creditors finally catching up with her? Sarah? It's me. Kate, please open up. With a sigh of relief, Sarah unlocked the door. Kate came in quickly, holding Emma in her arms. Noah clung tightly to her hand. Thank God you're okay, Kate said, hugging her with one arm. I tried calling 1,000 times. I'm sorry, I just wasn't ready to talk to anyone. We need to talk, Kate said urgently. It's about that woman, Victoria. Sarah felt her stomach drop. She's been with you again? Not exactly. Kate set Emma down and pulled a crumpled envelope from her bag. She sent a private investigator who showed me this. It's newspaper clippings about you and your ex-husband. Sarah took the envelope with trembling fingers. And what did you say to him? The truth. Kate sat down on the worn-out couch, pulling Noah close. That I was a legal assistant at the office that investigated David Bennett's case. That I saw you hand over evidence against him months before the scandal broke. Sarah stared at her friend, stunned. You worked on the case? Kate nodded. When you found me on that street 6 months ago, I recognized you right away. Sarah Bennett, the wife who turned in her own husband and still got treated like she was guilty. Why didn't you say anything? You were clearly starting over, using a different name. It wasn't my place to drag up a painful past. Kate gave a sad smile. Besides, I was in a humiliating place myself, a former legal assistant living on the streets. Sarah sank into the nearest chair. All this time, you knew, and I was even more grateful for your help, knowing you had lost everything too. Kate squeezed Noah's hand. But that's not what matters now. You need to know what happened after you left the event. Sarah's heart raced. Victoria exposed me, didn't she? She ruined the project? She tried, Kate said with a mysterious smile. She started talking about fraud and imposters, but before she could say your name, Mr. Holloway took the microphone. James? He publicly admitted he lied about having a brain tumor. took full responsibility, saying he made up the illness to explain his sudden interest in charity because he didn't want to look weak to the shareholders. Sarah covered her mouth. He confessed? Completely. And then, to everyone's shock, especially his cousins, he announced he was donating $30 million of his personal fortune to permanently fund the Horizon Center. Kate shook her head, still amazed. The room exploded in applause. Victoria looked like she was about to faint. And what about me? He said the project director had to step away for personal reasons, but that your work had been essential. He didn't mention anything about your past. Sarah could hardly believe it. James had protected her. Even after learning the truth, he had saved the project, even at the cost of his own reputation. That's not all, Kate went on. Yesterday, the investigator came to my apartment again. He said Victoria Holloway wanted to meet with me personally. And did you go? With Noah and Emma, yes. I thought she wanted more dirt to use against you, but… Kate paused. She wanted to confirm my story, about you turning in your husband, about you being innocent. And I showed her documents I kept from that time. Statements, dates. I proved you tried to expose David months before the scandal, but no one believed the gold-digging wife. Kate took a deep breath. Sarah, Victoria offered me a job in Holloway Tech's legal department. Sarah blinked several times, trying to take it in. She what? She said she needed someone with verifiable integrity to oversee legal compliance on the project. I start Monday. Kate gave a nervous smile. Full salary benefits, corporate daycare for Emma. The pieces started to come together in Sarah's mind. James hadn't just taken the blame publicly. He was rebuilding the project, with or without her. And the Horizon Center? She finally asked. It's moving forward. Renovations are underway, and new families are being interviewed. Kate hesitated. They're looking for a new director, Sarah. Mr. Holloway keeps asking about you. A lump rose in Sarah's throat. He knows how to find me. He thinks you don't want to be found. That's what he told Victoria, right in front of me. If Sarah wants to come back, the door is open. If she'd rather start fresh somewhere else, I'll respect her choice. Noah, who had been quiet the whole time, tugged at Sarah's sleeve. Aunt Sarah, are you leaving? Please don't. Looking into the boy's worried face, Sarah felt her defenses crumble. For years she had run from her past, hiding behind a new name, a new city, an anonymous life. She had helped Kate and the kids quietly, always keeping her distance. But now, for the first time, she had a chance to face the truth, and maybe still be accepted. What do you think I should do, Kate? Her friend smiled. I think you already know the answer. The next morning, Sarah took a deep breath before walking into the Holloway Tech building. The front desk security guard, who used to ignore her when she was just a cleaning lady, now watched her with curiosity. I have a meeting with Mr. Holloway, she said, surprised by the firmness in her own voice. In the elevator, she nervously adjusted the only blazer she owned, bought from a second-hand store for her job interview as a cleaner more than a year ago. The executive office was quiet when she arrived. The secretary looked up, surprised. Ms. Mitchell, we weren't expecting to see you again. Is Mr. Holloway in? He went to check on the community center construction. He should be back in an hour. The secretary hesitated. Ms. Mitchell, a lot of what's being said around here, not all of it is true, is it? Sarah gave a slight smile. It rarely is. Instead of waiting at the office, Sarah decided to follow her instinct. She took a cab to the community center address in Dorchester. The old warehouse was nearly unrecognizable, with scaffolding covering the front and workers moving all around. And there he was, in the middle of the organized chaos, James Holloway, in jeans and rolled-up sleeves, reviewing blueprints with the site supervisor. For a few seconds, Sarah just watched him from a distance. There was something different about him now, something more real, less calculated than the polished CEO she had first met. Finally, gathering her courage, she walked toward him. James turned, as if sensing her presence, and froze when he saw her. Sarah. Her name came out like a sigh of relief. I heard you're looking for a director, she said simply. A slow smile spread across his face. Are you applying for the job? That depends. What happened to the last one? She had a complicated past, but she also had a kind of integrity I was slow to recognize. Sarah looked at the building in transformation. I heard you took the blame for the lie about the tumor. It was my lie to take. James stepped closer. Why didn't you ever tell me about Chicago? About David? For the same reason you made up an illness. Sometimes we lie because we're afraid the truth will make us unacceptable. A quiet moment of understanding passed between them. Kate told me everything, James continued. How you tried to report your husband, how no one believed you, how you lost everything even though you were innocent. He shook his head. I should have asked before judging, and I should have trusted you with the truth. We built this project on lies, like I said that night, but what we've built itself isn't a lie. James motioned toward the building. This is real. What we're doing for Kate, for Noah and Emma, for all these families. It's real. Sarah felt tears starting to form. Does Victoria still hate me? James gave a slight smile. Victoria never hated you. She was afraid you were like Diane. Who? My ex-wife. She married me for the money, and when we divorced, she took a fortune. James shrugged. Victoria's always been a little too protective. She hired Kate. Yes, to my surprise. Apparently, my cousin has a soft spot for women who stand up to the system to do what's right. He held out his hand. So what do you say, Sarah? Ready for a fresh start? No more lies this time? Sarah looked at his outstretched hand, feeling the weight of the past few years. The fall, the fight, the lonely rebuilding. Then she looked at the community center, where others would now have the chance to rebuild their own lives. No more lies, she agreed, taking his hand. But the handshake quickly turned into something more, a spontaneous hug, full of relief and possibility. The following weeks flew by. The Horizonte Community Center was coming together fast. Sarah threw herself into the work with renewed energy, this time without the burden of her secret. James stayed involved too, surprising everyone with how personally committed he was to the project. Mr. Holloway, we've got an issue with the industrial kitchen, Sarah said as she walked into his office one afternoon, carrying blueprints and budget notes. The health code requires. James, he corrected without looking up from his paperwork. How many times do I have to remind you? It's hard to break the habit after calling you Mister for a whole year. He finally looked up at her, a playful smile on his lips. You look different. I went to the salon, Sarah said, unconsciously touching her freshly cut hair. For the first time in years, she had allowed herself a small luxury. Kate talked me into it. It suits you. Less hidden. The casual comment struck a chord. That was exactly how Sarah had been feeling in recent weeks. Less hidden. Her real name had quietly been restored on official documents, lifting the constant fear of being found out. Speaking of Kate, she continued quickly, she's adjusting really well in the legal department. Victoria seems impressed. Victoria is more impressed with you, James revealed. She'll never admit it out loud, but she respects your resilience. Sarah smiled, a little surprised. Her relationship with Victoria had gone from open hostility to a sort of cautious respect. The truth about her past had, ironically, created an unexpected connection. They both understood the cost of protecting what they valued. So the kitchen, Sarah got back on track, spreading the plans out on the table. We need to make a change to the original layout. As they went over technical details, Sarah couldn't help but notice how their dynamic had changed. They were no longer boss and employee, or even benefactor and beneficiary. They were working as equals, each bringing their strengths to the table. That evening, almost everyone had already left when Sarah finally shut down her computer. To her surprise, James appeared at the door of her new office. Still here? It's almost 9 o'clock. I could say the same to you, she said with a yawn. Some things never change. You're still the last one out. Actually, I was waiting for you. He looked strangely nervous. I thought we could have dinner. To go over the project, of course. Sarah studied his face for a moment. Of course, the project. The restaurant James picked was elegant but not flashy, a place where they didn't feel out of place in their work clothes. During dinner, they talked about the community center, the new families chosen for the program, the vocational courses starting next month. But eventually, as expected, the conversation turned more personal. You never told me exactly what happened, James said gently. In Chicago. Sarah played with her napkin, gathering her thoughts. The short version, I married young, to a charismatic man who seemed to have the world at his feet. David was brilliant with money, or so everyone thought. Including you? For a while, yes. He gave me everything I thought I wanted: status, comfort, security. Sarah took a sip of water. But then I started noticing things that didn't add up, numbers that didn't match, investors who seemed too nervous. I confronted David, and he swore it was just aggressive strategy, nothing illegal. But you didn't believe him. Something felt off. I started digging, collecting documents. When I realized how big the fraud was, I was horrified. People had trusted him with their life savings. James listened closely as she went on. I took the evidence to a law firm that specialized in financial fraud. That's where Kate worked. But David had powerful connections, and somehow he found out what I was doing. He managed to convince everyone I was trying to blackmail clients, maybe even frame him for something he hadn't done. And no one believed you. I was the ambitious wife who enjoyed the money. Why would I turn on the man who gave me that life, unless I wanted more? Sarah gave a bitter smile. The irony is, I never cared about money as much as David thought I did. I liked the security, yes, but what really made me happy was seeing him happy, living his dream. What happened next? When the fraud finally came to light months later, David couldn't take the pressure. He took his own life before he could be arrested. Sarah took a deep breath. Suddenly, I was the widow of a con man, assumed to be his accomplice. I lost everything. Not just money. I lost friends, respect, my identity. And you came to Boston to start over. With a different name, yes. I was tired of being Sarah Bennett, the suspicious widow. I just wanted to be no one, I guess. James reached across the table and placed his hand over hers. You were never no one, Sarah, not even when you were quietly cleaning my house. His touch was warm and comforting. Sarah didn't pull her hand away. Your turn, she said. Why did you make up having a tumor? James leaned back in his chair, keeping his eyes on hers. The truth, I was improvising. I needed something dramatic to explain why I suddenly cared about doing good. Why did you need a reason? Because men like me don't do charity out of pure kindness. We do it for tax breaks, for marketing, to ease our guilt about being privileged. He shrugged. A terminal diagnosis explained everything. No one would question a man trying to make peace before he dies. That's cynical. It's realistic. Victoria would have shut down the project if I'd simply said I was moved by the kindness of my housekeeper feeding the homeless. Sarah thought about his words. Still, lying about something that serious? It was wrong, I know. James seemed genuinely sorry. I realized it when Victoria found out the truth. The lie stained something that was supposed to be purely good. And now, without the lie as an excuse, why are you still moving forward with the project? James looked her in the eyes. Because I met you, Sarah. You showed me that helping others doesn't have to be a distant transaction. It can be personal, meaningful, even life-changing. Dinner went on late into the evening, their conversation flowing easily from professional topics to personal ones. When they finally left, a light rain had started to fall. My driver can take you home, James offered. That's not necessary. I can take the subway. At 11 at night? No way. Sarah smiled, picking up on the protective tone. I can take care of myself. You know, I've survived worse than Boston's subway at night. I know you can. He looked at her with an intensity that made her heart beat faster. Let me come with you, then. I can take the subway, too. James Holloway on public transportation? Now that I have to see. Laughing, they walked together through the light rain to the nearest station. At that hour, the train car was nearly empty, giving them space to sit side by side, their shoulders brushing now and then as the train swayed. What's it like? He asked quietly. What is? Living normally. No drivers, no assistants, no doors magically opening in front of you. Sarah laughed. Is that what you think normal is? Most people aren't struggling to survive, you know. They're just living, working, loving, making mistakes, trying again. James looked down at his hands. Sometimes I wonder if I still remember how to do that, live normally. It's like riding a bike. You never really forget. When they reached the station near Sarah's apartment, James insisted on walking her to the door. They walked in a comfortable silence down the quiet streets, occasionally exchanging glances and smiles. Well, this is it, she said, stopping in front of the modest building. Sarah, James began, more hesitant than she'd ever seen him. Maybe I'm reading this wrong, but you're not, she interrupted gently. For a moment, they just stood there, light rain falling on them, time hanging between who they had been and who they might become. Then James touched her face softly, leaning in for a kiss that was tender and almost shy. Sarah closed her eyes, letting herself fully feel that moment, the first in a long time where she wasn't running, hiding, or protecting herself. When they pulled back, both smiled, a little surprised, a little nervous, completely sincere. "This complicates things," Sarah murmured. "Or maybe it makes things simpler," he replied, brushing a damp strand of hair from her face. "Good night, Sarah." "Good night, James." As she watched him walk away, Sarah felt a strange mix of fear and hope. She had learned the hard way that trusting powerful people was risky. But James wasn't David, and she was no longer the naive young woman she once was. For the first time in years, Sarah allowed herself to imagine a future that wasn't only shaped by her past, but by the possibilities of the present. The Horizon Community Center was almost ready for its grand opening. The freshly painted walls, new furniture, modern equipment, it was all coming together day by day. In the 3 months since the charity event, the project had grown beyond their initial expectations. 8 families were already living in subsidized apartments, 15 people had found stable jobs, and there was a waiting list for job training courses starting next week. "The daycare turned out perfect," Sarah said, walking through the colorful space filled with carefully arranged educational toys. "Emma's going to love it." Beside her, James smiled. In the past few weeks, they had found a comfortable rhythm, working together during the day, having dinner some nights, getting to know each other at a slower, more thoughtful pace than either had ever experienced before. "Speaking of kids, I got an interesting call today," James mentioned as they left the daycare. "A local TV station wants to do a story about the center. Apparently, Kate's journey, from homeless to working at Holloway Tech, caught their attention." Sarah stopped abruptly. "A story? With cameras and everything?" "Yes, why?" "It would be great publicity for the center." The panic was clear in Sarah's eyes. "James, if my face shows up on TV, my past in Chicago." James gently touched her shoulder. "Your name was legally restored, remember? There's nothing left to hide. Besides, you were cleared of any involvement in David's fraud." "Legally, yes, but the court of public opinion never cleared me." Sarah shook her head. "There are people in Chicago who lost everything because of David. If they recognize me—" "I understand," James nodded. "I'll talk to the station. We can focus the piece on Kate and the other families. You don't need to appear." The relief on Sarah's face was clear, but it quickly gave way to a more determined expression. "No, I'm tired of hiding." She took a deep breath. "If we're going to do this, I want to do it right. Tell my story too, the real story." James looked at her with a mix of surprise and admiration. "Are you sure? It's time to stop running." Sarah gave a nervous smile. "I just hope Victoria won't mind having the Holloway name linked to a reformed fraudster." "Speaking of my cousin," James's tone shifted slightly. "She's been acting strange lately. She canceled 2 board meetings and has been avoiding any talk about the company's finances." "That's not like her." "Not at all. Victoria lives for spreadsheets and financial reports." James frowned. "I'll check on it later. For now, should we finish the tour? The industrial kitchen is almost done." The next morning, Sarah was woken by her doorbell ringing non-stop. Still groggy, she opened the door to find James standing there, his face tense, holding the morning newspaper. "What's going on?" "Victoria," he said as he stepped inside and handed her the paper. "She's in trouble." The headline was unmistakable. Holloway Tech executive under investigation for financial misconduct. The article detailed how Victoria Holloway was being investigated for allegedly diverting company funds to personal offshore accounts and manipulating financial reports to inflate the company's stock value. "Oh my God," Sarah sat down, stunned. "Did you know about this?" "I had no idea until last night. The police contacted me." James looked exhausted. "Apparently, the investigation has been going on for months after a company accountant raised some red flags." "Do you think she's guilty?" James ran a hand over his face. "Honestly, I don't know. Victoria has always been tough in business, but dishonest. That's not the cousin I know." He hesitated. "Or maybe I've been naive, just like she always says I am." "What happens now?" "The police are going through all the company's financial records. Stocks have already dropped 20% since the news broke." James looked genuinely worried. Hundreds of jobs are at risk, including Kate's. Sarah's phone rang. It was Kate, her voice tight and rushed. "Sarah, did you see the paper? They're saying Miss Holloway embezzled millions. Everyone here is panicking, thinking they're going to lose their jobs." "Calm down, Kate. I'm with James right now. We'll figure this out." "There's more," Kate continued, lowering her voice. "I overheard some executives talking. They're suggesting you might be involved because of your past in Chicago." "What?" Sarah felt a chill. "How is that even possible? I never had access to the company's finances. They're hinting the Horizon Center could be a front for laundering money, that you and Victoria might be working together." James, who was listening in on the other line, jumped in. "That's absurd. Victoria was against the project from day one." "I'm just telling you what I heard, Mr. Holloway. And one more thing. The interview with the local TV station has been canceled. They want to wait until the Holloway situation is cleared up." After hanging up, Sarah and James exchanged worried glances. "This is a nightmare," she whispered. "I'm being tied to yet another financial scandal." "I won't let that happen," James said firmly. "I need to talk to Victoria, hear her side of the story." "Will she even see you if she's guilty?" "Victoria might be a lot of things, but she'd never run from a confrontation." That afternoon, while James tried to reach his cousin, Sarah went to the Horizon Center to reassure the staff. The mood was tense. Many of them had experienced financial instability before, and the thought of losing their new jobs was frightening. "Nothing is going to happen to the center," Sarah said during an impromptu meeting. "The project's funds are separate from Holloway Tech, held in an independent foundation." "But wasn't Miss Holloway also overseeing those funds?" one of the instructors asked. Sarah hesitated. It was true that Victoria, as part of her recent cooperation with the project, had taken on oversight of the foundation's finances, mostly to reassure investors rather than out of necessity. "We'll go over every account, but the funding for this year is already secured," she replied, trying to sound more confident than she felt. When Sarah returned to her office, she found a surprise. Victoria Holloway was sitting in her chair, elegant as always, despite the dark circles under her eyes. "Victoria? What are you doing here?" "Hiding from the press," she said with a humorless smile. "Ironic, isn't it? Seeking refuge in the one place I tried to shut down." Sarah carefully closed the door. "James is looking for you, so is the police." "I know. I'll speak to them soon." Victoria glanced around the modest office. "You've done a good job here, Sarah. Better than I expected." "Victoria, what's going on? Are the accusations true?" The executive let out a deep sigh. "Not the way they're being reported. Yes, I moved some funds. Yes, I altered a few reports, but not for personal gain." "Then what for?" "To save the company." Victoria stood up and walked over to the window, looking out over the courtyard where children played under supervision. 2 years ago, Holloway Tech was on the brink of collapse. James was deep in depression after his divorce, barely paying attention to the business. New competitors were popping up, faster, more innovative. And you stepped in. Someone had to. I made hard decisions, some right at the edge of legality, but all to protect our family's legacy. She turned to face Sarah. "The problem is, once you start bending the rules, it gets harder and harder to stop." Just then, the door swung open and James walked in, his face a mix of relief and anger when he saw his cousin. "Victoria, the whole city's looking for you." "James," she remained surprisingly calm. "I was just explaining to Sarah how we ended up here." "Then explain it to me too," he demanded, shutting the door. "The chief accountant is cooperating with the authorities, showing transactions I never approved." "Millions of dollars, Victoria." "To save your company," she replied coldly. "While you were mourning your failed marriage, I kept everything running. When we were desperate for capital, I came up with solutions. Illegal solutions. Necessary solutions." Victoria raised her voice for the first time. "You think that Silicon Valley investment appeared out of nowhere? Or that the government contracts came just because we smiled nicely?" She shook her head. Someone had to get their hands dirty. Sarah watched the exchange, a troubling feeling growing inside her. The justifications, the financial manipulation for a supposed greater good, it reminded her too much of what David had done. Except Victoria genuinely seemed to believe she was protecting the company, not herself. Victoria, Sarah said gently, the worse it gets, the harder it is to stop. Believe me, I've seen it happen. Victoria looked at her for a long moment. The difference, Sarah, is that I always knew exactly what I was doing, and I'll face the consequences. What consequences? James asked, now calmer. The company might go under. Hundreds of people could lose their jobs, thought. The Holloway name will be dragged through the mud. Victoria gave a sad smile. Unless there's a convenient scapegoat. Someone with a complicated financial past. Sarah felt the blood drain from her face. Are you suggesting? I'm not suggesting anything. I'm informing you that several executives have already started spreading the rumor that you, Sarah, with your questionable background, were the one who manipulated me. That Horizon Center was an elaborate distraction while we funneled funds together. That's ridiculous, James exploded. No one would believe that. People believe what they want to believe, cousin, especially when the alternative is admitting they were fooled by someone they trusted. Victoria turned to Sarah. I didn't start the rumor, to be clear, but I didn't deny it either when it surfaced this morning. The silence that followed was heavy with implications. Sarah felt sick. Once again, she might be blamed for something she didn't do. Are you going to turn yourself in? James asked at last. Yes, this afternoon. Victoria adjusted her perfectly tailored blazer. But before that, I wanted to see the famous center for myself, to understand what was so important that you'd risk our company's reputation for it. She gave Sarah a half smile. I have to admit, what you two built here is impressive. What happens now? Sarah asked, her mind racing. I'll probably be arrested, Victoria answered, disturbingly calm. The company will face intense scrutiny. The board will likely ask for your resignation, James. And the center? That depends on how well you two can distance this project from Holloway Tech's troubles. James stepped forward, determination on his face. We'll clear your name, Victoria. Don't be foolish, cousin. She shook her head. I'm guilty of what they're accusing me of. Maybe not for the reasons they think, but still, guilty. Victoria grabbed her expensive purse, getting ready to leave. What you need to do now is protect what really matters, the people who depend on you. This center, Sarah. As Victoria reached the door, Sarah felt she had to say something. Victoria, what you did doesn't define who you are. Believe me, I know that better than anyone. The executive paused, turning back with a thoughtful look. Maybe you're not the worst thing that ever happened to my cousin after all. With a final nod, she walked out. James and Sarah stood in silence, trying to process what had just happened. She's going to sacrifice herself, James finally said quietly, and let the rumors about you keep spreading. Sarah took a deep breath, forcing herself to think clearly. We need to act fast. The interview with the local TV station. They canceled, remember? Then let's find another station. We have to tell our story before the rumors become the truth. A spark of determination lit up in James's eyes. I've got a better idea. Let's hold a press conference. Today. Today? There's no time to lose. Victoria's turning herself in this afternoon, and the rumors about you are already out there. James grabbed his phone. I'll call the press, the investors, everyone involved. It's time the full truth came out. As he started making calls, Sarah tried to calm the panic rising inside her. Years ago in Chicago, she had stayed out of the spotlight while David faced the accusations alone. It had ended badly. The public had judged her just as guilty as him. Would it be different this time? James, she said, cutting in while he was still on the phone, what exactly are you planning? He covered the receiver with his hand. Press conference at 4 o'clock at Holloway Tech's headquarters. I'll lay it all out. How the project started with a lie about the tumor, Victoria's financial moves, her motives, everything. And what about me? My past? Especially about you. It's time the world meets the real Sarah Bennett. The woman who had the courage to report her own husband, rebuild her life from scratch, and help others do the same. Sarah's fear slowly gave way to growing resolve. Yes, it was time to stop running, time to stop letting others tell her story. By 3 o'clock, as they were preparing for the press conference, James got a call that changed everything. Victoria had turned herself in, just as she'd promised. But before that, she had submitted documents detailing all of her actions, and to everyone's surprise, documents that completely cleared Sarah of any involvement. Even more surprising, Victoria admitted that she had originally planned to use the Horizon Center as a cover for embezzling funds, but changed her mind after seeing the real work being done there. Instead, she quietly transferred $5 million from her own fortune to the center's foundation, securing its operations for at least 2 more years, no matter what happened to Holloway Tech. "I don't understand," Sarah said, confused. "Why would she do that?" James looked just as surprised. "Maybe Victoria has more layers than we thought." The press conference was a storm of camera flashes and questions. James took the lead as CEO of Holloway Tech, first confirming the accusations against Victoria, but also explaining that her actions were desperate attempts to save the company during a crisis. "Victoria Holloway made serious mistakes, and she'll be held accountable," he said. "But it's important to understand that her actions, while wrong, weren't driven by personal greed. They were a twisted effort to protect her family's legacy and the jobs of hundreds of people." Then, to everyone's surprise, James called Sarah up to the podium. With her heart pounding, but her voice steady, she faced the crowd of reporters and cameras. "My name is Sarah Bennett. 6 years ago in Chicago, I was the wife of David Bennett, a financial consultant who committed a massive fraud. When I discovered what he'd done, I tried to report him, but no one listened. After the scandal broke and my husband took his own life, I lost everything, not just material things, but my identity, my credibility, my voice." The cameras kept flashing as she went on. "I moved to Boston, changed my name, and started over as a janitor. That's when I met people like Kate and her children, people who were also victims of things beyond their control. The Horizon Community Center was born out of the belief that everyone deserves a second chance." Then Sarah looked straight into the cameras, determined to take control of her story for the first time. "There are rumors linking me to the financial troubles at Holloway Tech. Let me be clear. I had absolutely no involvement in Victoria Holloway's actions. I'm no longer a silent victim, and I won't allow my story to be twisted again." The press conference went on for nearly 2 hours, with James outlining the company's restructuring plans and Sarah explaining the work being done at the Horizon Center. For many journalists, the real story, the former socialite turned janitor who was helping the homeless, was even more compelling than the fraud allegations. Let's have a little fun with those who only read the comments. Type Pepsi in the comments. Only those who made it this far will get it. Now let's continue the story. When it was finally over, James and Sarah found themselves alone in the now empty conference room, exhausted but relieved. "You were amazing," he said, taking her hands in his. "I'm shaking," Sarah admitted, "but for the first time in years, I feel like I've gotten my voice back." "What Victoria did, that secret donation? She gave us a chance to survive the storm," Sarah finished. "Now it's up to us." James nodded, pulling her into a hug. "Do you think we can do it? Save the center, even with all this bad publicity?" Sarah rested her head on his shoulder. "We can, because now we're not building on lies, we're building on the truth, imperfect as it may be." That night, as they headed home, they both knew tough days lay ahead. The company was in crisis, the center under scrutiny, and Victoria was facing serious legal consequences. But for the first time, Sarah didn't feel the urge to run, to hide, or to reinvent herself in another city under another name. She was finally ready to face the world as she truly was, Sarah Bennett, a woman with a complicated past and a future full of possibility. 6 months had passed since the media storm around Holloway Tech and the Horizon Community Center. Fall had given way to winter, and now winter was slowly stepping aside for the first signs of spring in Boston. Sarah stood by the window of her new office at the center, watching children play in the freshly renovated courtyard. Among them, Noah ran with joy, now hardly recognizable from the shy, undernourished boy she had first met on the street over a year ago. Emma, nearly 3, proudly showed off her colorful rain boots to the other kids. "Thinking about how much has changed?" Kate's voice broke into her thoughts. Sarah smiled at her friend, who now led the center's legal department, offering free assistance to families in need. "It's surreal, isn't it? Sometimes I wake up thinking I'm still in that tiny apartment, worried about late rent." Kate nodded, fully understanding. "And sometimes I still jump at noises outside, afraid someone's going to steal what little we have." She looked out at her kids playing freely. "I'll never be able to thank you enough for everything you've done." The fallout from the financial scandal had been intense, but surprisingly different from what they had feared. After the press conference, Sarah's story, her fall from grace in Chicago, her life as a janitor, and her devotion to helping others, captured the public's imagination. What could have been another devastating scandal turned into a story of redemption and second chances. Victoria had pleaded guilty to multiple charges and received a 5-year sentence, reduced to 3 for cooperating with authorities. She was now serving her time in a minimum security federal prison, where, ironically, she had started a program teaching financial and business skills to fellow inmates. Holloway Tech survived, though it was smaller and restructured. James had surprised the board by announcing he would split his time between the company and the Horizon Center, something unthinkable for the once single-minded executive. "The new group of families arrives tomorrow," Kate said, checking her calendar. 5 families, 12 kids in total. "Are we ready? Are the apartments furnished?" "All set, thanks to the weekend volunteers." Kate paused briefly. "Sarah, did you see today's paper?" "I haven't had the chance yet. Why?" Kate pulled a copy from her bag. Victoria gave an interview from prison. Sarah took the paper and quickly found the article. To her surprise, Victoria had spoken at length about the Horizon Center, calling it the most meaningful legacy of the Holloway family and encouraging other companies to invest in similar initiatives. "She really has changed," Sarah murmured, moved. "People can surprise you," Kate said with a smile, "like a certain cleaning lady who changed so many lives." After Kate left, Sarah returned to the window, thinking about the incredible journey of the past few months. The Horizon Center hadn't just survived the scandal, it had thrived. The unexpected publicity brought in new donors, volunteers, and even opportunities to replicate the model in other cities. Her phone rang. It was James. "Sarah, can you come to the estate tonight? I have something important to discuss." The seriousness in his voice worried her. "Is everything okay, James?" "Everything's perfectly fine," he assured her. I need you here. At 7? "Of course, I'll be there." The rest of the day, Sarah tried to focus on her work, but her mind kept drifting back to James's mysterious tone. In recent weeks, their relationship had reached a new level of closeness and understanding. From reluctant coworkers to project partners, from friends to something deeper, the progression had been natural and easy, built on mutual respect and growing admiration. At exactly 7 o'clock, the taxi dropped her off in front of the Holloway estate, but this time felt different from every other time she'd been there. First as an anonymous cleaner, then as an employee, later as a project partner. Tonight, the house was lit differently, with soft lights outlining a path through the garden. Martha, the housekeeper, opened the door with a knowing smile. "Good evening, Sarah. He's waiting for you in the back garden." "In the garden? In this cold?" Sarah asked, confused. Martha just smiled wider. "Follow the lights." Curious, Sarah walked through the house she once used to clean, following the trail of small lanterns that led into the garden. When she opened the back door, she caught her breath. The garden, usually formal and a bit stiff, had been transformed. Hundreds of tiny lights hung from the trees, creating a magical starlit effect. A path of white rose petals led to the central gazebo, now wrapped in flowers and more lights. And in the center of the gazebo stood James, dressed more sharply than ever in a dark suit, but with an expression she'd never seen before. A nearly visible vulnerability, a very human nervousness that made her heart race. "James," she murmured, walking slowly toward him. "What is all this?" He reached out his hand, inviting her into the gazebo. "Do you remember the first real conversation we had? Right here in this garden when you thought you were about to get fired for bringing food to Kate?" Sarah smiled at the memory. "How could I forget? I thought my life was over, again. And I thought mine was finally beginning." James looked at her, his gaze deep and steady. "Sarah, that day, I lied about being terminally ill because I didn't know how else to explain, not even to myself, why I cared so much about what you were doing. Why that simple act of kindness touched me so deeply." He took her hands, his touch gentle but steady. "Now I understand. You showed me a world beyond my own. A world where people truly care about one another, where second chances are real. where value isn't in what we own, but in what we give. Sarah's eyes began to sting with unshed tears as James went on. These past few months have been the hardest, and somehow, the most meaningful of my life. Victoria in prison, the company in crisis, the center under pressure. And still, all I can think about is how grateful I am for that moment, a year ago, when I decided to follow my cleaning lady to see what she was hiding. Then, to Sarah's complete surprise, James knelt down in front of her, pulling a small velvet box from his pocket. "Sarah Bennett, you taught me the meaning of courage, the courage to start over, to help others even when you were barely holding on yourself, to face your past instead of running from it. You showed me that real wealth isn't measured in dollars, but in lives changed." He opened the box, revealing a delicate ring, not flashy or extravagant, but elegant in its simplicity. A sapphire, surrounded by small diamonds. "The blue reminds me of your eyes that first day, when you stood up to me after I found out about the food," he said with an emotional smile. "Sarah Bennett, would you give me the honor of sharing not just a social project, but a whole life? Will you marry me?" Tears finally spilled down Sarah's cheeks. The journey that had brought her to this moment flashed through her mind. The fall in Chicago, the anonymous years of struggle, the constant fear of being exposed, and then, somehow, finding understanding, acceptance, and love in the most unexpected place. "Yes," she answered, her voice choked with emotion. "Yes, James Holloway, I will marry you." When he slid the ring onto her finger and stood to embrace her, Sarah felt like the circle had finally come full. The cleaning lady and the millionaire, both changed by a chance encounter and the courage to see beyond appearances. The kiss they shared under the sparkling gazebo lights sealed a promise that went far beyond words. A promise of a life built not on convenient lies or carefully maintained appearances, but on truth, compassion, and a shared purpose. The Horizon Community Center had never looked so full of life as it did that spring afternoon. The freshly painted walls were decorated with simple flowers and soft lights. The large hall, usually used for classes and training, had been transformed into a warm, intimate wedding space. "Nervous?" Kate asked, adjusting the simple yet elegant white dress Sarah had chosen for the big day. "Strangely, no," Sarah replied with a calm smile. "It feels right." Choosing to hold the wedding at the center had been an easy and unanimous decision. That space represented everything they valued and the journey they had taken together. The guests weren't Boston's social elite, but an unexpected and meaningful mix. Families helped by the center, staff members, a few Holloway tech executives, Martha the housekeeper, and even, surprisingly, Victoria Holloway, who had received special permission to attend, escorted by discreet guards. Noah, now 6 years old and dressed in a tiny suit that made him adorably uncomfortable, came into the makeshift bridal room. "Aunt Sarah," he called out with serious urgency, "it's time. Uncle James looks like he's going to faint from nerves." Sarah laughed, adjusting her simple veil one last time. Kate hugged her tightly before leaving to take her place as maid of honor. "Thank you for everything," Sarah whispered. "No, thank you," Kate replied with emotion. "For giving us a real life." The small hall grew quiet as the doors opened. There would be no dramatic entrance or elaborate wedding march, just Sarah, walking in alone, representing her independent journey to the man waiting for her at the simple altar. James stood there, more handsome than ever in his tuxedo, but what truly caught Sarah's attention was his expression, a mix of awe, love, and deep gratitude that made her heart swell. The ceremony was simple and deeply personal. They had written their own vows, reflecting the extraordinary path that had brought them there. "Sarah," James began, his voice steady despite the emotion in his eyes, "when you came into my life, I was an incomplete man, rich in possessions but poor in real connections. You showed me that true wealth is in the bonds we build and the lives we touch." He held her hands tightly, as if to give more weight to every word. "I promise never to forget the most important lesson you taught me, that small acts of kindness can spark great change. I promise to be your partner in every way, not just on the easy days, but especially on the hard ones. I promise to build with you not just a house, but a home, where love, compassion, and honesty are our foundation." When it was her turn, Sarah took a deep breath, looking at the man in front of her. Not a distant millionaire anymore, but the complex, wonderful person she had grown to love. James, our story began in an unexpected way, a quick gesture, a sudden curiosity, a meeting that would change our lives forever. Of all the mansions in Boston, I walked into yours. Of all the people who could have seen me feeding Kate and the kids, it was you. Her voice trembled slightly, holding back emotion. I promise to always stand by your side, just like I have through the hardest times this past year. I promise to remind us, when days get hard, of the cleaner and the boss who found something precious where no one expected it. I promise never to run again, not from challenges, not from truth, and not from the love we've built together. As they exchanged rings, simple gold bands without any show, Sarah looked out at the faces in the small crowd. Kate, tears in her eyes, Noah and Emma trying to stay still, Victoria, wearing a surprisingly gentle expression, and dozens of others whose lives had been woven together with theirs through the Horizon Center. When the officiant finally pronounced them husband and wife, the kiss they shared was followed by clapping and a few emotional tears from the guests. It wasn't just the union of two people. It was the celebration of a journey of transformation that had touched countless lives. The reception that followed had none of the flashy luxury one might expect from a man in James's position. Instead, it was a warm and genuine celebration, with homemade food prepared by the center's own beneficiaries, cheerful music, and heartfelt conversations. At one point, Sarah found herself momentarily alone with Victoria, who had managed to step away from the guards for a private word. "I have to admit," Victoria said in her usual direct tone, though softer than usual, "you surprised me, Sarah Bennett, or should I say Sarah Holloway now." "What do you mean?" "I thought you were just another gold digger. Or worse, someone using a sad story to manipulate my cousin." Victoria shrugged. "I was completely wrong." Sarah smiled, understanding this was probably as close to an apology as she would ever get from Victoria. "We were both protecting what we loved, just in different ways. The difference is, your way worked better," Victoria noted, a slight smile softening her normally stern face. "Look at all this." She gestured toward the center, at the people celebrating. "You built something real, something that's going to last." "We built it," Sarah corrected. "All of us, including you." Victoria raised an eyebrow. "Me? I tried to sabotage this place from the start. And then you saved it with that secret donation. Not to mention your legal situation forced us all to face truths we'd been avoiding." A genuine smile, maybe the first Sarah had ever seen, appeared on Victoria's face. "Always finding the silver lining, aren't you? Now I understand why my cousin needs you so much." Before they could say more, the guards approached discreetly, signaling that Victoria's time was up. The former executive straightened her posture. "Well, Mrs. Holloway, enjoy your evening." She offered her hand formally. "And take good care of him. James has always been better than the rest of us. He just needed someone to remind him." The night carried on with more dancing, laughter, and meaningful conversations. At one point, James pulled Sarah onto the center of the makeshift dance floor, holding her close as they swayed to a soft melody. "Happy, Mrs. Holloway?" he murmured against her hair. "More than I ever thought possible," she replied, resting her head on his shoulder. Looking around, Sarah saw Kate dancing with Noah on her feet, saw Emma fast asleep in the arms of one of the daycare staff, saw former homeless residents chatting happily with Holloway tech executives, worlds colliding and blending in ways that once seemed impossible. "You know what I think about sometimes?" James asked gently. "What?" "That in some parallel universe, I never noticed you sneaking out with that lunchbox. I never followed you to Kate. I stayed the same lonely, work-obsessed man. And you stayed just the invisible janitor." Sarah shivered slightly at the thought. What a sad universe that would be. "That's why I'm grateful every day, that I paid attention, just once in my life, to what really mattered." When the music ended, they held each other a moment longer, soaking in the fullness of it all. For Sarah, who had once lost everything and rebuilt her life from the ashes, this wasn't just a new chapter. It was a reminder that sometimes the greatest gifts come disguised in the most unlikely situations. For James, who once had everything money could buy, but never found true connection, it was the culmination of a journey that began with a simple moment of curiosity, following his janitor to see what she was hiding in her bag. I think it's time for our announcement, James finally said, taking her hand. Sarah nodded, walking with him to the small stage. James asked for everyone's attention, and the room gradually quieted. First, we want to thank every one of you for being here. Today is meaningful, not just because of our wedding, but because it represents the coming together of two worlds that in the past rarely met in any real way. Sarah looked at her new husband's face, open, sincere, so different from the distant and guarded CEO she had first met. Sarah and I have a special announcement, he continued. Starting today, along with the services we already offer, the Horizon Community Center will be expanding. We're launching the New Beginnings program, which will provide full scholarships to children and young people in vulnerable situations and offer job training and employment opportunities for adults. A wave of excitement spread through the room as James went on. We believe everyone deserves a second chance, something we've both learned from personal experience. This center began with a simple but powerful act of kindness when Sarah risked her job to feed a family in need. Now, we want to multiply that act 1,000 times. Sarah stepped forward, joining James in the announcement. What we've learned on our journey is that the most meaningful changes often start with small acts of courage and compassion. Every person in this room has the power to make a difference in someone's life. This center isn't just a building or a program. It's a testament to what happens when we choose to look beyond appearances and give people a real chance to start over. As the guests applauded, James pulled Sarah in for a spontaneous kiss. Not the formal kind shared during a ceremony, but a heartfelt gesture of passion and gratitude that made the room erupt in even louder applause and cheers. Later, as the celebration finally began to wind down, James and Sarah stepped out onto the center's patio, looking up at the stars over Boston. He wrapped his arms around her, shielding her from the cool spring night air. "So, where do we go from here, Mrs. Holloway?" he asked. Sarah smiled, turning in his arms to face the man who had changed her life just as much as she had changed his. "Home," she replied simply. "Together." And as they got into the car that would take them back to the mansion, no longer a symbol of lonely wealth, but a true home they had both learned to build, Sarah reflected that sometimes the happiest endings aren't the ones from fairy tales, but the ones we patiently create, brick by brick, truth by truth, and one fresh start at a time. What did you think of Sarah and James's story? Share your thoughts in the comments. On a scale of 0 to 10, how would you rate this story? Don't forget to subscribe and click the bell so you don't miss any of our stories. And check out more inspiring stories right here on the end screen.